Senator from Vermont.
Mr. President, this has been an interesting day of debate. It actually feels good to hear people really speak on an issue. As President Pro Tem, I've sat in that chair where my distinguished friend from Maine is sitting now as presiding officer. I sat there for hours today and listened to the debates and heard many I found extremely good, and then I heard some others. But I appreciate the fact that I had the opportunity as President Pro Tem to hear so many other senators in both parties speak. You know, I spoke yesterday about protecting everyone's vote on a ballot and how important that is. I know that because in my own state of Vermont, and when I first ran, it was a very Republican state. I've been on the ballot between my times as state's attorney and senator, between primaries and general elections. I've been on the ballot in Vermont 24 times. I never questioned that the ballots would be counted accurately and honestly, even though in several of the elections, 80 to 90% of the people counting the ballots were the town clerks, and they were Republicans.
Could we have order in the Senate, please? Take your conversation off the floor. Thank you.
So after those 24 times, I think I have some idea of how the Senate works. And I can also say with seniority comes a bit of experience. This is my 48th year here in the U.S. Senate. Having been elected by those same Vermonters I praise for the way they protect the sanctity of the ballot 8 times. Still the only Democrat sent to the United States Senate by the voters of Vermont. I've become the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, the former chairman and ranking member of the Judiciary and Agriculture Committee, and then honored 3 times to be elected as President pro tempore. So let me just take a couple of minutes with your indulgence, Mr. President, to talk about what the Senate was, what it has become, and what it can be again. I think my experience qualifies me to say that. My conscience compels me to say that. We each of us stand on the shoulders of giants, the senators from across the political spectrum, from around this nation to forge a path for America. They met the moment of the time not with timidity or fear, but with action, with decisiveness. Now, was the road taken an easy one? No. Was the struggle short? No. But was it worth the sacrifice, the dedication, the commitment, and yes, the compromise to meet it? Of course. But before the Senate today is the issue that's at the heart of our very government, the right to vote. The one thing we can hold sacred, no matter what party we belong to, the right to vote. Time and time again, the Constitution has been amended to expand the right to vote, not to restrict it, but to expand it. Look at the 15th Amendment, the 19th, the 24th, the 26th. These each gave greater access to the ballot box to more Americans. It furthered the shared goal that ours be the most exclusive and most democratic nation on earth. But today we do have a scourge of laws, no matter what we say on the floor. The facts are we have a scourge of laws making their way through partisan legislatures across the country. They'd roll back the tides of time, eroding the most fundamental right, all at a time when technology and pure common sense should tell us that voting should be a lot more accessible than it is. And coupled with a challenge from the Supreme Court that Congress affirmatively act. Remember this, the Supreme Court said, why didn't the Congress step in there and act to restore the long bipartisan Voting Rights Act? There's no more important time than now for us to meaningfully address this constitutional right, this foundational right. Now, there's some honest questions to ask here of ourselves, of each other. Do we really want to make it more difficult for Americans to vote legally and safely? Is that what democracy means to you? To me? Do we really want to allow states to make it more difficult for blue-collar workers or the poor or the disadvantaged to vote when the great advances of time and technology are there where you can easily make it easier to vote, not more difficult? Are we really going to turn back the clock to an era where state and local jurisdictions can blatantly discriminate against certain voters? Yes, people of color, minority populations, by simply rigging the systems of voting or counting or changing the map to erase the progress of generations, make meaningless the fights of lions like John Lewis, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and so many others. Is that really what we stand for in this century? Were we elected by our constituents to flatly obstruct any action in this body simply because our party is not in the majority? Or were we elected to tacitly agree with a prescribed agenda? The Senate, and those who stand in it, owe more to our constituents and to this nation than blind party loyalty. We owe it to the nation to do what is right. We owe it to our conscience to do what's right. Partisan disagreements, divisions, stalemates dot the pages of our young nation's history when you go back and read it. But it's the moments of bipartisanship that punctuate it. So I'd ask the question of our two leaders. Mr. Majority Leader, should we not have a debate, a real debate in these issues, with amendments unbound by deadlines or time limits? But in answering that, I also ask the Minority Leader, do we not have an obligation to Americans, your constituents and mine, to at least talk about these issues, offer honest and meaningful proposals, then vote them up or vote them down? Are we not intended to be the greatest deliberative body in the world? Probably was when I came here, but these days we surely are not. And history will remember this moment, a moment when we stood for the foundational right of our democracy, the right to vote, or we stood against it. Long have I said on this floor that the conscience of the nation rests in the United States Senate, or should. Today, each of us, is sworn to uphold the Constitution. As a member of this great body, that we must examine our conscience. We must decide whether it be the politics of exclusion or the justice of inclusion that be the indelible mark of the 117th Congress. And we must decide if the Senate envisioned by our founders can be restored. The giants, the lions of the Senate, are the members who rise above to meet these moments and have the courage to do what is right. If our job were easy, anyone could do it. But throughout history, fewer than 2,000 Americans have had the honor, the privilege, the responsibility to hold the title of the United States Senator. I've been proud to serve with 1 out of every 5 of those senators. Some I agreed with, some I disagreed with. I can say this, we, the 100 here today, are caretakers of a legacy far greater than our own. We shoulder the responsibility of a nation founded under the principle that governments are instituted among its people, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And I fear that if we let this moment, this pivotal moment, pass us by with no debate, no action, no advancement, we'll not only be derelict in our duty, but we'll betray the very oath we swore when we stood in front of the desk you're sitting in, Mr. President, and we pledge to defend the Constitution, to continue the endless goal of forming a more perfect union. We should pass the freedom to vote, the John R. Lewis Act. But we should, at the very least, have the courage to debate it. I feel such a privilege serving Vermont. I feel such a privilege to have been on the ballot 24 times in our state, because I could always trust that everybody who wanted to vote could. Today, we have the technology, we have the ability to have far more people vote. Don't we owe it to this country? Don't we owe it to our oath of office to do that? I yield the floor.